So welcome to Mindset Mastery. I'm David Phelan, and in this presentation, Just Breathe, Strategies to Optimize Body and Mind, I'm going to be sharing with you some things that I've learned in my work in biofeedback and therapy, working with my clients and in coaching about how the mind and the body work together, and particularly the way that we can use breath to manage what's happening with our thinking and also what's going on with our physiology. So as you join us, if you would type into the comment section your name and where you're broadcasting from, that would be very helpful. And also, as we go along, just know that if you have questions or any comments, you can feel free to drop those in the comments section also, and I'll answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. So the first thing that I would like you to do as we get started is just to take a moment and notice your breathing. Without trying to change it, just notice. And allow yourself to take several breaths in and out and just noticing your breathing. And as you do that, see if you can notice what it feels like to breathe. Can you feel your chest moving? Can you feel your belly moving? Can you feel a cooling sensation at the tip of your nose? Can you feel your sinus passages or your mouth dry out a little bit with each breath? So what we're noticing is the physiological sensations that we're having that are related to breathing. And it can be helpful to recognize that we're breathing all the time, and yet often we don't even recognize that that's something that we're doing. One of the teachers that I like once commented, you know, you've breathed out about as many times as you've breathed in throughout your entire life, plus or minus a few, and who's keeping track of that? Who's doing the counting, right? It's something that our body is doing for us, and our body is amazing, and but as amazing as it can quickly get into trouble. And one place in particular where we can get into trouble is that our stress response system that is in our body has not really kept up with the developments in our society. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about back when we were cave people, the kind of stressors that we had to deal with were things like hungry tigers. Now, if we were attacked by a hungry tiger, then our body would engage the stress response system. Our heart rate would increase, our muscle tension would increase, our breathing would become more rapid, and all of those things would be very helpful for us dealing with that stressor. Because in that kind of situation, what we want is to be able to fight or to be able to run away. So you may have heard about fight or flight, and since that idea was originally developed, now there's other ideas like freeze is another response, or fawn or feign. So those are some other responses that go along with when we're in a high stress situation like that. So when our body becomes activated, that's really helpful for situations in which physical action is necessary. But the challenge with that is that many of the stressors that we experience today are not the same kind of stressors. They're not life-threatening situations. So when we were dealing with things like tigers, the tiger would attack, and really there's three outcomes: that we fight the tiger and win, we run away and we get away, or we get eaten, right? And with all three of those outcomes, it's over pretty quickly. And what I mean by that is, if you fight with a tiger, if you don't win quickly, you're not going to win. If you try to run away to get away, if you don't get away quickly, you're not going to get away. And again, if you get eaten by this tiger, that's over pretty quickly too. And so our stress response system is designed to be able to deal with threats like that are over quickly. So the part of our nervous system that is responsible for those increases, like in the heart rate and respiration, is called the sympathetic part of the nervous system, and it's responsible for activating the body. And then the parasympathetic part of the system is responsible to calm the system back down. But unfortunately, what happens in today's society is that we go from one stressful event to another stressful event to another stressful event. The stressors aren't over quickly. You know, if you've ever had to sit in rush hour traffic, you could be in that for a half an hour or more, right? And our stress response system is really not set up well to be able to deal with that kind of stress. And so over time, what happens is we spend more time in activation and we spend less time in the calming response. So more time in the sympathetic state and less time in the parasympathetic. So it's like the sympathetic becomes the stronger muscle and the parasympathetic becomes weaker. And so if we don't have strategies to engage the parasympathetic system, then we can go from stressor to stressor to stressor, and what happens over time is that the body shuts down. It loses its ability to recover, and then it just, we go into shutdown. So you can look at things like chronic diseases, and you can see where the body's resources have become depleted, and it just doesn't have the ability to take care of itself anymore. So that's the situation that we're in. And so we're looking for ways to engage the parasympathetic system. Well, breathing is one of the best ways to do that. So in fact, the method that I teach my clients and that I'm going to share with you today, I call it parasympathetic breathing because that's its intent. Its intent is to engage the parasympathetic system. So if you think about the typical rate of breathing for an adult is between 12 and 14 breaths per minute. And when we get stressed, we tend to do one of two things. We either hold our breath or we start breathing faster. It might be 18, 19, 20 breaths per minute or higher. Well, within about 30 seconds of changing your breathing, you're going to change your blood oxygen level. When you change your blood oxygen level, you change oxygen delivery to your brain. Now, keep in mind, your brain runs on oxygen. So when we start changing our breathing, it's going to make it more difficult to do things like to think clearly. Okay, now down at the other end of the range, between about 5 and 7 breaths per minute, is what's going to give you the greatest heart rate variability. Now, that may be a term that you're not familiar with, but so an average heart rate for an adult is about 70 beats per minute. But if that never changes, if it's 70 beats per minute, 70 beats per minute, 70 beats per minute, that's the single greatest predictor of a heart attack. What's supposed to happen is that when you breathe in, your heart rate's supposed to go up. When you breathe out, your heart rate's supposed to go down. So if it goes up to 80 and down to 60, up to 80 and down to 60, the average is still 70 beats per minute, but you've got 20 beats per minute of variability, right? And for the most part, for the things that we're going to be talking about, greater heart rate variability is better. Now, an increased heart rate variability has been associated with all sorts of physical health benefits and mental health benefits. So on the mental health, things like anxiety and depression have been demonstrated to decrease as heart rate variability increases. On the physical health side, things like hypertension, high blood pressure, gastrointestinal disorders, skin conditions, all can be benefited from increasing heart rate variability. And so what I want you to recognize is that increasing heart rate variability is good for us in a broad spectrum of ways. And so not only is it going to help us in dealing with stress itself, but again, it has these additional benefits. So down at the lower end of that range, between 5 and 7 breaths per minute is what's going to give you the greatest heart rate variability. Now, as I work with people in the office, and particularly when we're doing biofeedback, one of the things that we can do is monitor their respiration using a respiration gauge. And we can identify exactly what their ideal rate of breathing is. But short of doing that, 6 is in the middle of that range of 5 and 7 breaths per minute. So 6 is a really easy number to work with because 6 breaths per minute is 1 breath every 10 seconds. So if you were to breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, that's 1 breath every 10 seconds or 6 breaths per minute. And so what I recommend to my clients is 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out for at least 5 minutes a day. And while they're doing that, what I ask them to do is not to the count of 5, but I actually want them to get a clock and time themselves, right? To make sure that they're breathing in for 5 seconds and breathing out for 5 seconds. And I tell them, you know, if they like that, and many of my clients do find that rate of breathing very calming, I tell them if you like it, you can do it more. You can't really do it too much, and the more you do it, the more your body will like you. So if they do it for 5 minutes while they're watching a clock, they might decide to do it at other times. It could be something like every time you come to a red light, you might fall back into that breathing, or getting ready for bed as you are in bed and you are allowing yourself to drift to sleep. Breathing that way can be calming and can help you to get to sleep. Or, you know, if you're in the shower, or, you know, if you can identify different sort of triggers to remind you to breathe like that, it can be very helpful. What I notice for myself is oftentimes when I'm working with a client, maybe I'll ask them to write something, or I'll ask them to do an exercise, and while they're doing that, I fall back into that pattern of breathing because it's just so good for us. One of my mentors used to say, you know, we're going to breathe anyways, we might as well breathe parasympathetically. So again, parasympathetic breathing can lead to calming. Now, a couple things that you may want to notice. Sometimes when people try this, they find it difficult. And so I want to talk about the difficulty. So what I'd invite you to do is just to take a few breaths like that. I'm going to count it for you, and so I want you to try to breathe along with my counting. And so we're going to start off with an exhalation. So breathe out, and then breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. Now, if that was calming for you, then you can keep doing that. But for some of my clients, they find it difficult. And here are a couple places where you might find difficulty. So imagine that we were graphing your breathing, and the line would go up as you're breathing in, the line would come down as you're breathing out. Well, sometimes what happens is people breathe in and their lungs get full before they get to 5, okay? And so maybe they get to 3 and their lungs are already full, and if that's the case, all they can do is like hold their breath for a few more seconds. So what we want to do in that case is we want to regulate our breathing, and it has to do with how much air we're moving. So I can breathe in, I can fill my lungs completely in 1 second. Or I can take, you know, more than 5 seconds to breathe in. Right? The difference there is how much air I'm moving. So the easiest way, particularly at the beginning, to regulate how much air you're moving is by pursing your lips. So imagine as you're breathing in that you're breathing in through a straw. If you do it that way, as you start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the idea is that your lungs are don't get to full until you get to 5. And by the time that you get to 5, they are full, they are comfortably full, they're not over full, okay? And the same thing on the exhalation. If you find that your lungs are empty before you get to 10, then again, regulate it by pursing your lips, slow down the breathing, and then you eventually, with practice, you'll be able to get it to where your lungs are empty and comfortably empty at 10, then breathing in again, comfortably full at 5, comfortably empty at 10 again, okay? So now sometimes as I'm talking about this, people ask me about, well, should I be breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, or, how should I do that? So here's my response to that. So when you think about breathing, there are a couple of different factors. One is the pattern, and so the pattern that I'm giving you is 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. You may have heard of different patterns, like an extended exhalation pattern. That might be like breathing into the count of 4 and breathing out to the count of 6, breathing into the count of 3, breathing out to the count of 7, something like that. Or you may be familiar with box breathing. Box breathing might be breathe into the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, breathe into the count of 4. So as you're doing that, you're breathing in a different pattern. There's another pattern that combines these, where you breathe into the count of 4, you hold to the count of 7, and you breathe out to the count of 6. So there are different patterns that we can use, okay? So there's the pattern of it, but then there's also the mechanics of it. So in terms of mechanics, there are 3 different sets of muscles that we can breathe with. We can breathe with our diaphragm, which is a huge sheet of muscle that's under the rib cage. It only has one job, and that job is to help us breathe. You can breathe from the intercostal muscles of the rib cage, or you can breathe from your shoulders, okay? Now, the shoulders and the intercostal muscles of the rib cage, that's not their primary job. Breathing isn't their primary job. You can breathe with your shoulders by raising your shoulders to draw the breath in, but it takes a lot more energy. And so reverse breathing is where we're breathing from our chest or breathing from our shoulders rather than breathing from our belly. And I see this particularly with women, and you are, I'm sure, well aware that women are criticized in our society for how they look. And so there's a lot of pressure on men and women, but women in particular about how they look. And so I find that women will often hold in their stomach, and they're not even aware that they're doing that. But what happens is, if they're holding in their stomach, then they're not able to breathe all the way down into their belly. I was working with a woman, and she was having panic attacks every single day before she came to see me. And we only worked together for 3 sessions, and the only thing that we did was working on her breathing. Well, as soon as she got her breathing regulated, she was able to breathe down into her belly, the panic attack stopped, and she was able to get off of those medications, okay? So the mechanics of it, again, are we breathing from our belly, our chest, or our shoulders? So one simple way to kind of notice this for yourself is put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, and just breathe for a couple breaths. And as you do that, what I want you to notice is, do both hands move, or does only one hand move? If both hands are moving, notice which hand moves first. And again, maybe they move at the same time. And which hand moves most? And again, ideally what's happening is the hand on our belly is moving first and moving most. And if it's doing that, we know that we're breathing down into our belly. And so if you recognize that you have reverse breathing, you're breathing more from your chest, one way to work to address that would be to lie flat on your back with a heavy book on your belly, like a dictionary or an atlas or something like that, something that has some weight. And as you breathe in, you should notice that the book goes up. As you breathe out, the book should go down. And again, it generally doesn't take people very much practice to figure out how to regulate their breathing. And so again, the mechanics include the muscles. Are we breathing from our belly or chest or our shoulders? And the breathing also includes, are we breathing, or the mechanics also include, are we breathing from our mouth or through our nose? To begin with, I'm not as concerned with whether they're breathing through their mouth or their nose as they're breathing in the pattern, right? Once they can get that pattern right, then breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth can be helpful. But for some people, that's too much to think about all at the same time. So I'd rather them focus on their pattern of breathing and get that comfortable 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. After you've got that down, if you want to, you can move on to whether you're breathing through your mouth or your nose. One other comment I'll make about this. For a very small percentage of my clients, it actually increases anxiety. Those tend to be people who have health-related anxiety, particularly pulmonary or breathing-related anxiety anyways, right? And so what happens is that they get hyper-focused on their breathing, and that can increase their anxiety. So if that's something that you're dealing with, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can help you to figure out what to do with that. Okay, so that's a little bit about parasympathetic breathing. And then I wanted to mention a couple other things, because although it's true that we can often use breathing as a way to help to calm ourselves back down, there are other situations where we want to wake ourselves up, right? Like for me, around 2 or 3 o'clock, I notice a slump in my energy. Okay, now I could, and I have in the past, used like caffeine to take care of that, right? But if you want a natural way to do that, the bellows breath is a good way to wake yourself up. The bellows breath is conducted by breathing in and out through your nose rapidly, okay? And so I'm gonna model it for you, and then I wanna try doing it together. So it's gonna sound like this. Okay, so it's in and out through the nose rapidly. All right, now what I'd like you to do is to try doing that with me for a period of 1 minute. I'm going to be looking at the clock on my computer, and I'll tell you when to stop. Ready, and go. And stop. Okay, now you might find that that's too much. Going for an entire minute is too much, okay? But if you were able to do that, and even if you had to take breaks in between, you probably noticed that you are more alert and more stimulated than you were at the beginning. So that's one way to kind of wake yourself up through your breathing. And another strategy is alternating nostrils, okay? And so this one is, looks a little strange, but it can be very helpful also. And so the idea is that you're going to breathe in and out through one nostril and then switch to the other, okay? And you're gonna switch by closing one nostril as you're doing it. So it's gonna look like this. Okay, so that's another strategy, and I'm not going to do that for an entire minute, but you can do that for a minute as well. So parasympathetic breathing can calm us down, and again, it increases heart rate variability. It has all of those benefits. I was mentioning about hypertension. had one client that I was working with, and she engaged in the parasympathetic breathing pretty consistently, and she was able to lower her blood pressure by 20 points, and all she was doing differently was that breathing. So again, really good for heart rate variability, all sorts of mental health benefits and physical health benefits. And again, that's calming. And then if you need to wake yourself up, the bellows breath or the alternating nostrils. So that's what I have for today, and I appreciate you being with us. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, great. If this has been helpful to you, I would really encourage you to think about who else might benefit from this presentation, and to share the Transcend Personal Development Facebook page with them. My desire is to make this information available to as many people as possible, and if you could help with that, that would be great. So again, thank you for being with us. If you are not currently working with me, but you would like to be, feel free to reach out. Until next time, may God bless you.